At just 22, Princess Stephanie, born into a rising European royal family, was cruelly robbed of her ability to bear children, not by fate, but by a deadly gift from her own husband, Crown Prince Rudolf, who infected her with horrific venereal diseases. What turned a princess destined for a throne into a victim of some of the most shocking dark secrets in royal history? Today, we will unveil 12 horrifying truths about the tragic life of the infected princess. Stephanie was born on May 21, 1864, in Laeken Palace on the outskirts of Brussels, Belgium. Her father was Prince Leopold, heir to the Belgian throne, and son of King Leopold III, the first king of Belgium since its independence in 1831. Just a year and a half after Stephanie's birth, her grandfather passed away, and her father became King Leopold II. To the outside world, Leopold II was revered as a powerful statesman who elevated tiny Belgium to an international power. He commissioned magnificent palaces and grand civic buildings, cementing his reputation as a visionary leader. But behind the glittering facade of his reign, shadows loomed. Today, Leopold II's legacy is one of horror. He transformed the Congo into his private domain, ruling with an iron fist and exploiting its people for profit. Under his reign, millions of Congolese were enslaved in rubber plantations, enduring countless brutal acts. More tragically, these harsh conditions, coupled with disease and famine, led to a severe population decline in Congo. Stephanie's family wealth, therefore, was partly built on the blood money of the Congolese people. This is a dark and little-known aspect of the builder king Leopold II, delivering an initial shock to viewers about the source of royal fortunes. Stephanie's early years were marked by tragedy. In January 1869, her world shattered when her older brother, the heir to the throne, passed away, plunging the royal family into mourning. Though Stephanie was only 4.5 at the time, this tragedy left a deep mark on her soul and signaled the beginning of a rift in her parents' marriage. Then, in 1871, disaster struck again. Europe was still battling waves of deadly epidemics like typhus, smallpox, and the Blue Death, another name for cholera. Not long after, an outbreak swept through Brussels, and Stephanie, not yet 7, contracted a severe case of typhus. For weeks, the little girl drifted between life and death, unconscious, burning with fever, and in extreme pain. The family feared the worst, but against all odds, she survived. This struggle for survival highlights the fragility of life from Stephanie's very first years, creating a sense that a tragic destiny had pursued her since childhood. In 1878, Stephanie's fate was sealed. While still a teenager, she was introduced to Crown Prince Rudolf of Austria, the only son of Emperor Franz Joseph and heir to the vast Austro-Hungarian Empire. Rudolf was 20 and Stephanie was just 14, but their meeting was no coincidence. It was an arranged marriage in the making. Behind the scenes, negotiations were fervent. The Austrians viewed Stephanie as a suitable bride, someone who could secure the succession by producing male heirs. The pressure was immense, and after lengthy discussions, the marriage was arranged. On May 10, 1881, just days before her 17th birthday, Stephanie and Rudolf were married in a grand ceremony in Vienna. But hidden beneath the royal splendor were the dark clouds of a marriage devoid of love, governed solely by duty. Married life was far from a fairy tale for Stephanie. There was no grand romance, no deep affection, only obligation. Rudolf was mercurial, and Stephanie found herself trapped in the palace, under constant surveillance and with little freedom. This marriage highlights Stephanie's age difference and immaturity, along with the immense pressure to bear a male heir for the empire, creating empathy for the plight of a young girl being exploited. Despite the strained marriage, Stephanie gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth Marie, in September 1883. But instead of joy, Rudolf received the news with thinly veiled disappointment. Though he desired a male heir for the empire, this would be their only child and Stephanie's only child. By the mid-1880s, Stephanie was infertile, and the primary cause was her own husband. Rudolf was not only an alcoholic, but also a debauched womanizer, indulging in affairs with numerous women across Vienna. He had contracted multiple sexually transmitted diseases, syphilis and gonorrhea, and most historians agree that he likely transmitted both to Stephanie, rendering her permanently infertile at just 22. At first, doctors blamed peritonitis. Rudolf kept his illness a secret, and by the time Stephanie learned the truth, it was too late. Betrayed and humiliated, she was filled with resentment. She refused to share a bed with her husband, who regularly returned home at dawn, reeking of alcohol and other women. Meanwhile, Rudolf, immersed in his own suffering, spiraled further into depravity. By the late 1880s, everyone at court knew Stephanie would never have more children. Rudolf's affairs continued unabated, and the worst was yet to come. What a cruel tragedy for a dignified princess to face betrayal and the humiliation of infertility in her early 20s. Among Rudolf's many mistresses, one stood out, Baroness Mary Vetzera. In 1888, at just 17, she became entangled with the 30-year-old crown prince. During this period, Rudolf's behavior grew even more erratic, possibly due to his worsening syphilis. He and Vetzera began spending significant time at Meierling, a secluded hunting lodge near Vienna that Rudolf had purchased and turned into a private refuge from the royal court. On January 30th, 1889, Stephanie received shattering news. That morning, her husband, Crown Prince Rudolf, and Mary Vetzera were found dead at Meierling. The Meierling incident, as it came to be known, led to an investigation, and rumors of conspiracy, assassination, even political plots spread for years. But ultimately, the truth was grim. Rudolf had shot his mistress and then taken his own life. Thus, at 24, Stephanie became a widow and infertile. This incident shocked all of Europe, and the dark secrets behind it only amplified Stephanie's pain. She remained trapped in Vienna afterwards, facing her husband's violent death and countless rumors. After Rudolf's death, Stephanie hoped to return home to Belgium. But there was a problem. Her daughter, Elizabeth Marie, was still a Habsburg princess, and the Austrian imperial court steadfastly refused to allow her to leave Vienna. Stephanie, now the crown princess dowager, was trapped in a city where she was unwelcome. Her former in-laws had turned their backs on her, viewing her presence as a painful reminder of what had happened to Rudolf. During this lonely period, she found solace in a romance with Count Artur Podolski, a Polish nobleman who had stood by her in her darkest days. The loneliness, alienation, and feeling of being trapped in a city where she was unwelcome gnawed at Stephanie, making it impossible for the audience not to empathize with her pain of loss and abandonment. Unfortunately, fate struck Stephanie once again. Podolski, not yet 40, developed laryngeal cancer. A failed surgery left him unable to speak, and by March 1890, he passed away. Stephanie, still grieving Rudolf's violent death, was plunged into mourning once more. The ephemeral nature of life became evident again. Just as Stephanie found a glimmer of hope, tragedy struck again. To escape her sorrow, she traveled extensively, wandering across the Mediterranean, Malta, Tunisia, Sicily, Corfu, and many other places, seeking distraction, liberation, or perhaps a new beginning. Although still young and eligible for remarriage, King Leopold II had grand plans for Stephanie. He wanted her to marry the new heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. But this marriage never materialized. Instead, in the late 1890s, Stephanie found love with Count Elemer Lonier, a Hungarian nobleman. This was not a political alliance, but a marriage born of affection. Elemer even converted to Roman Catholicism in the hopes of gaining King Leopold's approval. However, it was to no avail. In a scathing letter, her father outright refused to approve the marriage. He would not allow his daughter to marry someone beneath her royal station. Nevertheless, Stephanie defied her father, and on March 22, 1900, she married Elemer at Miramar Castle near Trieste, relinquishing her royal titles in the process. This was the moment Stephanie defied social norms and her father's control, creating an emotional story of choice and personal freedom despite the sacrifice of her titles. During these years, family conflicts continued to fester in Belgium. Stephanie's father, King Leopold II, grew older and had no surviving direct male heir. Plans were made for his nephew, Prince Albert, to succeed him as King Albert I. Leopold had long been furious with his daughters for marrying below their royal station and had all but disowned them. His resentment was so profound that he forbade Stephanie from attending her own mother's funeral in 1902. He also refused to see her before his death. This is a shocking and little-known detail about the royal family's dynamics. The father's cruelty and Stephanie's pain at being unable to bid farewell to her mother one last time underscore her extreme solitude. After Leopold's death in 1909, his daughters expected to inherit a portion of his immense fortune. Instead, they made a rather shocking discovery. He had left the majority of his wealth to Caroline Lacroix, his much younger mistress, whom he had secretly married just 5 days before his death. Enraged, Stephanie and her sisters launched a bitter legal battle that lasted 5 years. Ultimately, Stephanie secured a settlement of 5 million francs in the summer of 1914. This struggle painted a picture of a contentious and bitter family feud, exposing the ugly side of royalty. It highlights Stephanie's indignation and her dramatic struggle against the injustice she faced. In the summer of 1914, during a state visit to Sarajevo, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the very man Stephanie's father had hoped she would marry, was assassinated by Serbian nationalist Gavrilo Princip. His death triggered a crisis that rapidly escalated into World War I. Just weeks later, Germany invaded Belgium, despite its neutrality, and Stephanie's homeland remained under German occupation for the next 4 years. As part of the war, Austria-Hungary allied with Germany, putting Stephanie in an awkward position, living within the empire that was helping occupy her homeland. Stephanie's relationship with her only daughter, Elizabeth Marie, became strained and eventually completely severed in the early 1920s. The reason was Elizabeth Marie's personal lifestyle and political views. She was a socialist and became known in Austria by the nickname the Red Archduchess. After a final argument in 1924, Stephanie and her daughter, Elizabeth Marie, seemingly cut off all contact, never speaking again. This is another of Stephanie's personal tragedies, showing her human aspect and internal struggles, divided by social prejudice and political differences, even within a mother-daughter relationship. During these years, Stephanie wrote her memoirs, published in 1935 and in English in 1937 under the title I Was to Be Empress. However, it was not a complete autobiography, as she barely touched on the half-century after Rudolf's death. Instead, the book was divided into 4 parts, with the final section titled Tragedy Mayerling. Clearly, her story, at least the version she chose to tell, ended in 1889. From September 1939, World War II erupted. Stephanie and her husband did not live near the front lines, and neighboring countries largely avoided the worst of the war. However, towards the end of the conflict, the couple worried about Nazi Germany's plans to convert their Rudolce villa into a field hospital. As the Soviet Red Army advanced into Central Europe in late spring 1945, Stephanie and Elamir sought refuge at Panhalma Arch Abbey. She died there on August 23, 1945, at the age of 81. A year earlier, she had disinherited her daughter, and Elizabeth Marie did not attend her mother's funeral. She was buried in the abbey's crypt, and Elamir, who passed away less than a year later, was interred beside her. This was the final act, showing the irreconcilable rift between mother and daughter, and Stephanie's silent death amidst the chaotic backdrop of World War II creates a sense of the ephemeral nature of life and life's shocks. What do you think about the tragedies she endured, and could she have lived a different life if not bound by royal fate? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video, where we will continue to unveil the hidden truths behind history.